My mother stood up over the Christmas roast and told me to leave and never return. Right in front of my 8-year-old daughter. I thought that was the worst thing that could happen tonight. But I was wrong. 5 minutes later, my father was on the floor gasping for air, and a stranger handed me a sealed envelope that proved their cruelty was not an accident. It was a legal strategy they had been planning for years. The ink was barely dry on the closing documents when I walked out of the title company office and breathed in the salty air of Morro Bay. It was a crisp Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where the sky looks like shattered glass, bright and sharp. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, clutching the heavy folder against my chest. Inside was the deed to the penthouse at the Aurelia, a glass-walled sanctuary on the 24th floor overlooking the Pacific. I had done it. 33 years old. 10 years of working 80-hour weeks in corporate restructuring, eating dinner out of plastic containers, and driving a sedan that rattled when it went over 60 miles per hour. I had saved every bonus, every commission, and every unexpected windfall. I had lived like a monk while my peers bought Teslas and vacationed in Tulum, and now I owned a piece of the sky. But as I unlocked my car, the familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. It was the Pavlovian response to good news that every child of Elaine and Graham Powell develops eventually. In my family, success was not something you celebrated. It was a dinner bell. It signaled that there was more to take. I got into my car and sat in the silence. I had to be careful. I had to be a vault. I drove straight to the only person I had told, Tessa Lang. We met at a small bistro 3 blocks from my new building. Tessa was already there, guarding a bottle of champagne in an ice bucket. When she saw me, she did not scream. She did not wave her arms. She just gave me a look of fierce, quiet pride. "It is done," I said. Sliding into the booth, Tessa poured the champagne. The bubbles hissed softly. "To the glass castle," she said, "and to the fortress walls you are going to build around it." She knew the rule. We had discussed it 1,000 times. This penthouse was not just a purchase. It was a declaration of independence. It was a physical boundary. My parents lived 2 hours inland in a house they could barely afford, constantly refinancing to fund trips they did not enjoy and cars they did not drive. My younger sister, Bryn, bounced between roommates and boyfriends, leaving a trail of broken leases and financial emergencies in her wake. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted cold and clean. "I have not told them," I said. "Good," Tessa said. "Keep it that way. You know what happens if you tell them." I nodded. I knew exactly what happened. It started with a compliment. Then it shifted to a guilt trip about how hard they had it. Then came the small request. Just a loan. Just a cosign. Just a few nights on the couch. And before you knew it, you were hollowed out. "I'm not telling them anything." I said, "I am going to move in slowly. I hired movers for Thursday. By the weekend, I will be sleeping listening to the ocean. But secrets in my family have a way of rotting if you keep them too long." My phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a photo of my mother. "Elaine," Tessa raised an eyebrow. "Did you telepathically summon her?" I stared at the screen. Ignore it, I told myself, but the conditioning was deep. I picked it up. "Hello? Ruby!" My mother's voice was bright, almost musical. It was her asking for something voice. "I missed you. I feel like we have not talked in ages. How is work?" "Work is fine," I said. My guard instantly up. "Just busy. You work too hard," she said. "Your father and I were just saying that." Ruby works herself to the bone. "You need to enjoy your life more. You know, Bryn just got back from Cabo and she looks refreshed. You should take a page out of her book." I refrained from mentioning that I had paid for Bryn's plane ticket to Cabo to stop her from getting evicted. A deal I had made to keep her away from my apartment for a week. "I am fine." "Mom," I said, "did you need something?" "Need something?" She laughed. A brittle, tinkling sound. Can't a mother call her daughter? Actually, I did want to ask. We are going to be in the city later this week. Your father has an appointment with a specialist for his back. We thought we might swing by and take you to dinner. Where are you living these days? You are still in that little studio on 4th, right? The lie sat on my tongue, heavy and safe. Yes, still on 4th. But then I hesitated. I had already given notice at the studio. I was officially out on Friday. If they showed up and buzzed the intercom, a stranger would answer. And if they found out I had moved without telling them, the fallout would be nuclear. They would paint it as a betrayal. They would wail about how I cut them out, how I was ashamed of them. I made a calculation, a dangerous one. I am actually moving. I said. There was a silence on the other end, the kind of silence where you can hear the gears turning. Moving? Elaine said. Where? I bought a place, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. A condo, in Marrow Bay. Oh, Ruby! She shrieked. Graham, come here. Ruby bought a condo. I flinched, pulling the phone away from my ear. That is wonderful, she said, breathless. Where is it? Is it nice? How many bedrooms? It is small. I lied. Just a 1-bedroom. Very efficient. Send me the address, she said. We have to send a housewarming gift. Or better yet, since we are coming into town, we can see it. No. I said quickly, I am not settled yet. It is a mess. Boxes everywhere. No furniture. We do not care about boxes. We are family. Text me the address. Ruby. For safety. You know how your father worries if he does not know where you are. The safety card. It was their trump card. If I refused, I was being reckless and ungrateful. Fine, I said. I will text it to you. But please, do not come by this week. I am serious. I am working and unpacking. Of course. Sweetie, she said. We are just so proud of you. I hung up and looked at Tessa. You gave them the address. She said, I had to. I said, they were coming to the city anyway. Tessa took a long sip of her champagne. You are going to regret that. Thursday morning arrived with a layer of marine fog that hugged the coastline. I stood in the lobby of the Aurelia, watching the concierge, a man named Leo with a perfectly trimmed beard, polish the brass railing. The building was silent, smelling of expensive lilies and floor wax. I felt a thrill of ownership. This was my lobby. These were my lilies. My movers were scheduled for 10 o'clock. I had my coffee, my clipboard, and my plan. I was going to direct the furniture placement, tip the guys heavily, and spend the evening sitting on my floor eating pizza and watching the lights of the harbor. At 9:45, the automatic glass doors slid open. I turned, expecting the moving crew. Instead, I saw a caravan. My father, Graham, walked in first. He was wearing his city clothes, a polo shirt tucked into khaki pants that were pulled up too high, and a windbreaker. He looked around the lobby with a critical, appraising eye, like a building inspector looking for a code violation. Behind him came Elaine. She was wearing a floral scarf and carrying a potted orchid that looked like it was dying, and trailing them, dragging 2 massive suitcases and a duffel bag. Was Bryn? My blood ran cold. The temperature in the lobby seemed to drop 10 degrees. I walked toward them, my heels clicking on the marble. The sound echoed, sharp and gun-like. What are you doing here? I asked. Surprise! Elaine shouted. Her voice was too loud for the hushed lobby. Leo looked up from his desk, startled. We came to help, Graham announced, puffing out his chest. He walked right past me and tapped a knuckle on a marble pillar. Real stone? Or veneer? It is real, I said, my voice tight. I told you not to come. Oh, stop it, Elaine said, thrusting the sad orchid into my hands. You can't move by yourself. It is pathetic. We are here to supervise. And look, we brought reinforcements. She gestured to Bryn, who had stopped by a velvet armchair and was checking her reflection in the glass wall. Bryn looked tired, but she was dressed in a matching loungewear set that probably cost more than my first car. Hey, Rubes, Bryn said. Nice place. A little sterile. But we can fix that. Why do you have suitcases? I asked. The question hung in the air. Elaine's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then brightened again. too wide, too teeth-heavy. Well, that is the other surprise, Elaine said. It is just the funniest thing. You know how Bryn was living with that girl? Sarah? The one with the cat? I nodded slowly. I did not know Sarah, but I knew the pattern. Well, Sarah turned out to be crazy, Elaine said, lowering her voice to a stage whisper. Totally unstable. She kicked Bryn out this morning. Can you believe it? No notice, nothing, just jealousy, if you ask me. Bryn rolled her eyes. She is a psycho. Rubes, she locked me out. So, Elaine continued, clapping her hands together, it is perfect timing. Bryn needs a place to crash for a couple of weeks until she finds a new spot. And you need help unpacking. It is serendipity. It was not serendipity. It was an ambush. I looked at the luggage. It wasn't trash bags or cardboard boxes, which is what you pack when you are kicked out in an emergency. It was Louis Vuitton hardshell rollers. And leaning against the suitcases was a large, flat object wrapped in bubble wrap that looked suspiciously like Bryn's favorite framed poster of a French perfume ad. You packed art, I said. What? Bryn looked down. Oh, yeah. I didn't want Sarah to steal it. I looked at my father. He was over by the elevator bank, pressing the button. Hey, he called out to me. Which one is the freight elevator? I told the guy outside we needed the dock for 20 minutes. I froze. You told who? The doorman, Graham said. I told him we were the family moving crew. He gave us a pass for the rental truck. Rental truck? I walked over to the glass wall and looked out. Parked in the circular drive, right behind my car, was a U-Haul. You rented a U-Haul? I asked. For 2 suitcases? Well, Elaine said, coming up beside me, we brought some of your old things from the garage. You know, your high school yearbooks, that beanbag chair you loved, and Bryn has a few boxes of clothes. I turned to face them. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my face was stone. This was the moment Tessa warned me about. No, I said. The word fell into the lobby like a stone in a pond. Graham stopped pressing the elevator button. Elaine's smile froze. Bryn looked up from her phone. What did you say? Graham asked. His voice was low. The jovial dad act was slipping. I said no. I repeated, Bryn is not staying here. Elaine laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. Don't be silly. Ruby, she has nowhere to go. She is your sister. There are hotels. I said, I will pay for a hotel for 3 nights, but she is not staying in my apartment. 3 nights? Bryn scoffed. Ruby, I need 2 weeks, maybe a month. I have to find a job first. A month? The truth came out. This is a 1-bedroom apartment. I said, there is no room. You have a living room, Graham said. He stepped closer to me, invading my personal space. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, and he used his size to intimidate. He had been doing it since I was 6. We saw the floor plan online. There is plenty of space for an air mattress. Don't be selfish. Ruby, I am not being selfish, I said, keeping my voice level. I am being clear. I just bought this place. I am not even moved in yet. I am not having guests. Guests? Elaine cried. She put a hand on her chest. We are not guests. We are your family. How can you be so cruel? Bryn is in crisis. Bryn did not look like she was in crisis. She looked bored. She was inspecting her nails. She can stay at the Marriott downtown. I said, I will call right now and book a room. I pulled out my phone. Graham reached out and slapped his hand over my screen. The contact was shocking. He didn't hit me, but the violence of the gesture, the entitlement of touching my property, of stopping my action, made me flinch. You will do no such thing, Graham growled. You are going to take your sister's bags upstairs. You are going to give her a key, and you are going to thank us for bringing your old junk from the garage. Do you hear me? Leo, the concierge, was standing up now. He was watching us. I saw his hand hovering over the phone at his desk. I stepped back, moving out of my father's reach. If you do not move that truck, I said, looking Graham in the eye, the building will have it towed. And if you do not leave, I will have security escort you out. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Elaine gasped. You wouldn't. Try me, I said. I was shaking. My hands were trembling so hard I had to clench them into fists at my sides. But I didn't look away. Graham's face turned a mottled shade of red. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated loathing. It wasn't the look of a disappointed father. It was the look of a man who realized his appliance was broken. Fine, he spat. He turned to Elaine. Get the girl. We are leaving. But Graham? Elaine started. I said we are leaving, he roared. He grabbed the handle of Bryn's suitcase and yanked it so hard it nearly tipped over. Bryn looked at me, her eyes narrowing. You are such a bitch. Ruby, you always have been. They marched out. The sliding doors opened and closed. I watched them go. I watched Graham throw the suitcases into the back of the U-Haul. I watched Elaine get into the passenger seat, wiping her eyes. I watched Bryn climb into the back, slamming the door. They drove off. I stood in the lobby for a long time. Is everything all right? Ms. Powell? Leo asked gently. I took a deep breath. Yes, Leo. Thank you. I spent the rest of the day in a haze. The movers came. They unpacked. I pointed to corners. I signed papers. By 6 o'clock, the apartment was full of boxes. But I had a bed and a couch. I sat on the couch, staring out at the ocean. The sun was setting, turning the water into liquid copper. I should have felt triumphant. I had won. I had held the line, but I felt sick. My phone had been silent for hours. No angry texts, no guilt-tripping voicemails. That was worse. The silence meant they were planning. At 7:30, my intercom buzzed. I jumped. Hello? I said into the panel. Ms. Powell? It was the night concierge. There is a package delivery for you. Send it up, I said. A few minutes later, a young man brought up a pizza. I hadn't ordered it. I checked the receipt taped to the box. It was paid for. There was a note. Congratulations on the new place. Eat something. Tessa. I smiled for the first time that day. I opened the box and took a slice. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and leaned my forehead against the cool glass. Then my phone rang. It was a local number I didn't recognize. Hello? Ms. Powell? This is Milo Granger. I am the property manager for the Aurelia. My stomach dropped. Hi, Milo. Is something wrong? I hope not, he said. His voice was professional but strained. I am calling because I had a confusing interaction with my assistant earlier, and I wanted to clarify something with you directly. Okay, I said. We received a request this afternoon regarding your unit. Milo said, someone claiming to be your authorized family representative called the office. I gripped the phone tighter. Who? A man? He didn't give a name, but he had your full name, your unit number, and your closing date. He was asking about the procedure for adding an occupant to the deed. The room spun. To the deed? Yes, Milo said, and he also asked about ordering a duplicate set of fob keys. He claimed you had authorized him to pick them up tomorrow morning because you were busy with work. I felt the blood drain from my face. My father. He hadn't just wanted to drop Bryn off. He wanted keys. He wanted access. I did not authorize that. I said, my voice was shaking. I did not authorize anyone. I live alone. I thought as much. Milo said, we denied the request, obviously. We require notarized forms for any deed changes, and keys must be picked up by the owner in person with ID. But he was quite insistent. He actually knew about the HOA welcome packet. The packet? I asked. Yes, we sent out the digital welcome packet to your email on file this morning. He referenced specific page numbers regarding the guest policy. I hung up the phone with Milo after assuring him that no one was allowed in my unit but me. I opened my laptop. I went to my email. There it was, the welcome email from the Aurelia HOA, time-stamped 8 a.m. I opened it, and then I saw it. It wasn't just in my inbox. It had been forwarded. I checked the sent folder. At 8:15 a.m., the email had been forwarded to epowell55yahoo.com, my mother. I stared at the screen. How? Then I remembered, 2 years ago, when I was in the hospital for appendicitis. I had given my mother my email password so she could send a document to my boss. I had never changed it. I had forgotten. She had been logging into my email for 2 years. I went to the forwarded message in her inbox. She hadn't just forwarded it to herself. She had forwarded it to Graham, and she had added a note. Look at page 14. Section 3. Subletting is allowed for immediate family if the lease is under 6 months. We can use this. I opened the attachment. Page 14 was highlighted in yellow. They hadn't just come to drop Bryn off because of a roommate dispute. They had read the bylaws. They had researched the loopholes. They had planned to install Bryn in my apartment, claiming she was a subletter under the family clause, and then likely refused to leave. And Graham calling for keys? That was the backup plan. If I said no, they would just come back when I was at work. I sat there in my beautiful, expensive, glass-walled penthouse, and I realized the truth. This wasn't a visit. It was an invasion. I closed my laptop. I did not cry. I did not call them to scream. I picked up my phone and changed my email password. Then I enabled two-factor authentication. Then I called my cell phone provider and added a PIN to my account so no one could access my call logs. Then I opened a blank document and typed a letter. Dear Elaine and Graham, effective immediately. All communication must be in writing. Do not come to my building. Do not contact my building management. If you attempt to access my home again, I will file a police report for harassment. Ruby. I hit send. I walked back to the window. The city lights were twinkling below me. A grid of gold and amber. Somewhere out there, in a hotel room or a rental truck, my family was plotting their next move. They thought I was just being a brat. They thought I was having a tantrum. They didn't realize that I had just declared war. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass. My face looked harder than it had this morning. Less like a daughter, more like a soldier. This was my home, and I would burn every bridge I had to protect it. The fluorescent lights of the Larkhaven Regional Hospital emergency waiting room hummed with a sound that felt like a drill pressing against my temple. It was a specific frequency of anxiety, one that smelled of antiseptic floor wax and stale coffee. I sat on a vinyl chair that was peeling at the corners, my body angled protectively toward my daughter, Holly. We had been here for 40 minutes. 40 minutes since the ambulance doors had slammed shut on the picture-perfect Christmas dinner in Briar Glen. 40 minutes since my father, Gordon Long, had turned a shade of gray that did not belong on a living human and collapsed on the foyer rug. Holly was vibrating. She was 8 years old, and her world was supposed to be sugar cookies and wrapping paper, not sirens and the terrified faces of adults. I could feel the tremors running through her small frame where her arm pressed against mine. I need you to look at me, Bug, I said, keeping my voice pitched low and steady. Holly looked up. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the harsh overhead lights. Is Grandpa going to die? I took her hands in mine. Her fingers were cold. The doctors are working very hard to make sure he is okay. I said, that is their job. Do you know what our job is right now? She shook her head, a small, jerky motion. Our job is to wait and be calm so they can focus. I said, and I think our job is also to figure out which one of these vending machine snacks is the most ridiculous. Do you remember the game? It was a distraction technique I had invented when she was 4 and needed stitches in her chin. We would judge snacks based on how fake they looked. Holly managed a weak, watery smile. The orange ones? Let us go investigate, I said. I stood up and led her to the glowing machine in the corner. I was moving through a sludge of adrenaline and exhaustion, but I forced my movements to be fluid and slow. If I panicked, Holly panicked, and I refused to let the chaos of the Long family swallow my daughter the way it had swallowed me. Across the waiting room, near the automatic doors, my mother, Marilyn, and my brother, Evan, were standing in a tight, heated huddle. They did not look like a grieving wife and a concerned son. They looked like conspirators. Marilyn was still wearing her festive emerald silk dress, but the hem was stained with something dark. wine or dirt from when she had knelt beside Gordon. She was gripping Evan's forearm with a claw-like intensity. Evan, pale and sweating in his cashmere sweater, looked like he was trying to pull away without actually moving. They were arguing. I could not hear the words, but I knew the cadence. It was the hiss of blame, the sharp intake of breath that signaled a defensive maneuver. My mother was not weeping. She was strategizing. "Mommy, look," Holly said, pointing at the glass. "That one is neon blue. That is definitely radioactive," I said. Slotting a dollar bill into the machine, "We will take it." As the coil turned and the package dropped, I glanced back at Marilyn. She caught my eye. For a second, her face was a mask of pure fury, the same expression she had worn at the dinner table when she told me to leave and never return. Then, instantly, the mask slipped. She crumpled, bringing a hand to her mouth, performing the role of the distraught spouse for the benefit of the triage nurse passing by. The switch was so seamless it made my stomach turn. I grabbed the blue raspberry gummy snacks and handed them to Holly. "Let us sit back down," I said. A woman with a clipboard and a soft, knitted cardigan approached us. She had the kind eyes of someone who did this 20 times a day. "Mrs. Long?" she asked, looking at me. "Miss Long," I corrected. "Sadie." "I am the on-call social worker," she said. "I see you have a little one here. The waiting room can get a bit intense. We have a family quiet room down the hall. It has a TV, some coloring supplies, and a couch that is a little more comfortable than these chairs. Would you like me to take her there? You can stay." "Of course, or you can wait here for the doctor." I looked at Holly. She was tearing open the gummy packet with her teeth. Her shoulders hunched. She needed to be away from Marilyn. She needed to be away from the visual confirmation of her grandfather's mortality. "I will take her," I said. We followed the woman down a beige corridor, away from the sirens and the weeping families. The quiet room was small but mercifully dim. There was a low table with a bin of crayons and a stack of coloring books. "This is much better," I said to Holly. "You can be the captain of this room." Holly climbed onto the couch and picked up a green crayon. "Are you going to stay?" she asked. "I will stay right here until you get settled," I said. "Then I might have to go talk to Grandma for a minute, but I will be right back. I promise." I sat with her for 10 minutes. Watching her color a tree with aggressive, heavy strokes, I rubbed her back, grounding her, grounding myself. "Sadie?" I turned. A doctor in blue scrubs was standing in the doorway. He looked tired. He had the same unreadable expression every doctor wears before they deliver news that changes lives. "Is he alive?" I asked. "He is," the doctor said. "I am Dr. Vance. Your father has been stabilized, but he is in critical condition. He suffered a massive myocardial infarction, a heart attack." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "We need to make some immediate decisions regarding catheterization and potential surgery." "Doctor," Vance said, "I tried to speak with your mother, but she is indisposed. She seems to be having a panic attack. She pointed me to you. She said you handle the paperwork." I stared at him. A bitter, cold laugh bubbled up in my throat, but I swallowed it. 5 minutes before Gordon collapsed, Marilyn had told me I was unstable. She had told me I was drama-prone. She had evicted me from the family, and now, the moment reality became difficult, the moment there was a hard choice to be made and a form to be signed, she had shoved the responsibility onto me. It was the classic Long family dynamic. I was the outcast until I was the utility player. I was the black sheep until they needed someone to shear. "Where is she?" I asked. "She is in the chapel with your brother." "Doctor," Vance said, "but time is a factor here. Ms. Long, we need consent to proceed with the angiogram." I looked at Holly. She was focused on her drawing, humming a song under her breath. She was safe. I stood up. "I will sign," I said. I followed Dr. Vance to the nurse's station. He handed me a digital pad and a stylus. The screen was full of medical jargon. Risks of anesthesia, risks of bleeding, risks of death. I signed my name, Sadie Long. The signature looked spiky and angry. "Do whatever you have to do," I said, "Thank you." "Doctor," Vance said, "we will update you in an hour." I watched him disappear behind the swinging double doors. I was alone in the hallway, standing under a flickering light. I felt a strange sense of dislocation, as if I were watching myself from the ceiling. I had just authorized heart surgery for a man who had sat silently eating potatoes while his wife verbally annihilated me. "Sadie." The voice came from behind me. I turned to see my cousin, Tessa Wren, hurrying down the hall. She was wrapped in a heavy wool coat that smelled of winter air and menthol cigarettes. Her face was flushed from the cold. Tessa was the only member of the extended family who spoke to me without a filter. She was 5 years older, divorced twice, and worked as a paralegal for the county. She saw through the Briar Glen polish because she had never been able to afford it. "I heard," she said, pulling me into a rough, brief hug. "Evan texted me. Is he okay?" "He's in surgery," I said, "or heading there. A heart attack." Tessa pulled back and looked at me. "You look like hell." "Sade?" "Thanks," I said. "Marilyn kicked me out of the house 5 minutes before he dropped." Tessa's eyes narrowed. "Seriously? On Christmas?" "During the main course," I said. She stood up and made a speech. "Jesus," Tessa muttered. She reached into her oversized bag and pulled out a roll of peppermint lifesavers. She offered me one. I took it. The sugar hit my tongue, sharp and artificial. "Listen," Tessa said, lowering her voice. She glanced around the hallway to make sure we were alone. "I did not just come here to hold hands. I remembered something." "What?" I asked. "About 6 months ago, Gordon called me," Tessa said. "He was asking hypothetical questions. You know how he does. Asking about trust law, about asset freezes." "Why would he ask you?" I asked. "You do family law." "Exactly," Tessa said. "He asked what happens if a beneficiary is unaware they are a beneficiary. He asked if a trustee can block a sale if the other trustee is incapacitated." I frowned. Gordon and Marilyn controlled everything. There were no other trustees. "That is what I thought," Tessa said. "But he sounded scared." "Sadie. He mentioned the lake house, Pineglass Cabin. We have not been to Pineglass in 20 years, I said. "I thought they sold it." "They didn't," Tessa said. "He told me it was locked down." He used that phrase. "The cabin is locked down, but the key is missing." I told him to hire a real estate attorney, and he got quiet and hung up. I never heard back. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital air. Pineglass Cabin. I had vague memories of it. A dark A-frame structure near a frozen lake. The smell of wood smoke and damp wool. We stopped going when I was 12. Marilyn said it was too rustic. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because when I walked in just now, I saw Marilyn," Tessa said. "She is not in the chapel praying. She is on the phone in the alcove near the vending machines, and she is screaming at someone about a deadline." My stomach twisted. "A deadline? Something is going on." Tessa said, "The heart attack? Maybe it wasn't just cholesterol. Maybe it was stress," before I could respond. A nurse in blue scrubs walked up to us. She was holding a clear plastic bag labeled "Patient Belongings." "Gordon Long." "Excuse me," she said. "Are you the daughter?" "Yes," I said. "We catalogued Mr. Long's personal effects before taking him to surgery." The nurse said, "His wallet, his watch, his wedding ring, and we found this in his inside jacket pocket." She held out the bag. Inside, nestled against a leather wallet, was a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was crumpled, as if it had been grabbed in a hurry. The nurse pointed to the front of the envelope. "It has your name on it. We figured you should take it directly, rather than leaving it in the bag." I took the envelope from her. It was heavy. The paper was expensive. Textured linen stock. On the front, in bold, typed letters. To M.S. Sadie. Long, urgent. Immediate signature required. And below that, a stamp in red ink. Hand-delivered by courier. This was the envelope the neighbor had seen, the one Marilyn had tried to hide. I thanked the nurse, who nodded and walked away. Tessa moved closer. peering over my shoulder. "Open it," she whispered. My hands were trembling. I broke the wax seal on the back. It cracked with a dry snap. I pulled out a stack of documents. The letterhead at the top was embossed in black. Harrow Lyle, Attorneys at Law. I scanned the first page. It was a dense wall of legal jargon, but certain phrases leaped out at me. Notice of pending injunction. Subject: Pineglass Cabin Trust. Beneficiary action required. I flipped to the second page, and there it was. Whereas the property known as Pineglass Cabin is held in the Lenora Long Family Trust, and whereas the sale of said property has been initiated by Trustee Marilyn Long, pursuant to Article 4, Section C, no sale, transfer, or encumbrance of the property may occur without the written consent of the successor beneficiary, Sadie Long. I stopped breathing. Successor beneficiary? Tessa read aloud. Holy shit. Sadie, you are on the deed. I am on the trust. I corrected, my voice sounding hollow. I flipped to the last page. There was a signature line with my name printed under it, and a date, December 25th, today. The letter attached explained it clearly. The sale of Pineglass Cabin was scheduled to close on December 26th, tomorrow, but the title company had flagged a restriction. They needed my signature to waive my rights and allow the sale to proceed. That is why she wanted me to leave, I whispered. Tessa looked at me. What? She told me to leave and never return. I said, but she knew this courier was coming. She knew I had to sign this. No, Tessa said, her eyes widening. She wanted you gone so she could forge it, or so she could tell the lawyers you were unavailable, but the courier showed up while you were still there, and then Dad collapsed. I said, and in the chaos, the envelope ended up in his pocket. I looked at the document again. It was a request to waive my interest in the property, to give up my rights. Marilyn was selling the cabin, and she needed my permission. Permission she had never asked for. I felt a surge of anger so hot it made my vision blur. This was not just a family squabble. This was fraud. This was theft. Where is she? I asked. Tessa pointed down the hall. Near the chapel. Watch the door to the quiet room. I told Tessa, do not let anyone near Holly. I marched down the hallway. My heels clicked on the linoleum. A sharp, military rhythm. I clutched the envelope in my hand like a weapon. I found Marilyn in a small alcove near the restrooms. She was off the phone now, leaning against the wall, checking her makeup in a compact mirror. She was dabbing at her eyes, ensuring the mascara wasn't running, perfecting the image of the grieving widow. She saw me in the reflection of the mirror. She froze. Then she turned. Her eyes dropped to the envelope in my hand. For a second. There was no sound but the hum of the vending machines down the hall. You found it, she said. Her voice was flat. The nurse gave it to me. I said, it was in Dad's pocket. Marilyn sighed. A long, ragged sound. She snapped the compact shut and dropped it into her purse. Give it here. Sadie, she said. She held out her hand. I did not move. It is addressed to me. Mother, it is a mistake, she said. A clerical error. Harrow Lyle messed up the paperwork. They put your name on an old draft. I looked at the document. It does not look like a draft. It looks like an injunction blocking you from selling a property I apparently own part of. Marilyn's hand was still outstretched. It started to shake. A fine, violent tremor. Sadie, please, she said. Her voice cracked. This is not the time. Your father is in surgery. Do you have any respect? Do not use him as a shield. I said, you tried to kick me out of the house tonight so I wouldn't see this. I was trying to protect you, she hissed. She took a step toward me. Her eyes were wild. There is a deal on the table. Sadie, a very good deal. If we do not sign those papers by tomorrow morning, the buyer walks. We lose everything. We? I asked. You mean you? It is for the family, she cried. Her voice rose, echoing off the tile walls. A nurse down the hall looked over. Frowning, Marilyn lowered her voice to a frantic whisper. You do not understand the finances. Sadie, you never have. The upkeep on that cabin is drowning us. We have to sell it. It is just a rotting pile of wood. Then why do you need my signature? I asked. Because your grandmother was a confused old woman who wrote bad wills. Marilyn spat the words out. She put your name on a contingency clause 20 years ago. It means nothing. It is a technicality. If it is a technicality, I said, then why are you shaking? Marilyn stared at me. Her face seemed to collapse. The anger drained away, replaced by a desperate, terrifying vulnerability. She reached out and grabbed my arm. Her fingers dug into my flesh. Sadie, listen to me, she begged. Just sign it. Please, just sign the waiver. I will give you money. I will cut you a check from the sale. $10,000. 20. Just make it go away. She was bribing me, my own mother, standing in a hospital hallway while her husband's chest was being cut open, was trying to buy my compliance. I looked at her hand on my arm. I looked at the desperation in her eyes, and I realized something profound. She was terrified. She wasn't just controlling. She was cornered. I pulled my arm away. I am not signing anything. I said, not until I talk to a lawyer. Marilyn recoiled, as if I had slapped her. The vulnerability vanished. The mask slammed back into place, harder than before. Her lips curled into a sneer. Of course you won't, she said venomously. You are always trying to punish this family. The accusation hit me in the chest. Punish? I had spent my entire adult life trying to please them. I had swallowed every insult, every slight, every exclusion, just to be allowed at the table. I am not punishing you, I said quietly. I am reading. You are selfish, Marilyn said. Her voice was cold steel. You have always been selfish. Just like her. She did not say who her was. She didn't have to. She meant Lenora, my grandmother. I turned and walked away. Sadie, Marilyn called after me. If you walk away, do not come back. I kept walking. I had heard that line before. It didn't work the second time. I walked past the quiet room, checking to make sure Tessa was still standing guard. She gave me a thumbs up. I went into the emergency stairwell. It was concrete and cold. I sat down on the steps and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. I dialed Jules Mercer. Jules was my best friend from college. She worked in high-end forensic accounting. She understood money, and she understood liars. She answered on the second ring. Merry Christmas. Sud. Is everything okay? You sound like you're underwater. I am at the hospital. I said, Dad had a heart attack. Oh my God. Jules said, He is alive. I said, but Jules, something else happened. I told her everything. The dinner, the eviction, the envelope, the cabin, Marilyn's bribe. When I finished, there was a heavy silence on the line. Sadie, Jules said, her voice dropping into her professional register. Listen to me very carefully. Do not sign that paper. I told her I wouldn't. I said, good, Jules said, because injunctions like that do not appear out of thin air, and title companies do not flag clerical errors on Christmas Day unless there is a massive red flag on the deed. What do you think it is? I asked. I think your parents are trying to sell something they do not fully own, Jules said. And if your name is on a trust document from your grandmother, that means you have rights they have been hiding from you for decades. She paused. Sadie, if the buyer is pushing for a 24-hour close on a holiday, that is not a sale. That is a liquidation. They are trying to dump the asset before someone notices. Before I notice, I said, exactly. Jules said, you need a lawyer, a real one, not a family friend. I have a name, Mara Klein. She is tough, and she hates bullies. I will text you her number. Call her in the morning. I hung up. I sat in the stairwell for a long time, holding the phone against my chest. I thought about the Christmas dinners of my childhood, the tension, the feeling that I was always missing a joke or failing a test I didn't know I was taking. I had always thought I was the problem. I thought if I was just better, smarter, quieter, they would love me the way they loved Evan. But it wasn't about love. It was about leverage. I stood up and wiped my face. I opened the heavy fire door and walked back into the hospital hallway. I went to the quiet room. Tessa was sitting in a chair, reading a magazine. Holly was asleep on the couch, curled up under her coat. She had a green crayon still clutched in her hand. I walked over and sat down on the floor beside the couch. I brushed a strand of hair away from Holly's face. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. I looked at the envelope resting on the floor next to me. Christmas hadn't gone wrong. It hadn't been ruined by an accidental outburst or a medical emergency. This night was the inevitable collision of 30 years of lies. The trap had been set a long time ago. Tonight, it had finally sprung, but they had made a mistake. They thought they had caught a rabbit. I looked at my sleeping daughter. I thought about Marilyn's clawed hand on my arm. They had caught a wolf. I leaned my head back against the couch cushions and closed my eyes. I wasn't going anywhere, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of them. I was just waiting for the sun to rise. The office of Klein Barrage was nothing like the polished mahogany fortress of the firm my parents used. Tucked above a bakery in a brick building that had survived 3 recessions, it smelled faintly of yeast and old law books. There was no receptionist, just a bell on the desk and a woman standing by the window, watering a fern. Mara Klein turned as I walked in. She was 60, maybe older, with short gray hair cut in a practical bob and eyes that looked like they had seen every variety of human greed imaginable. She didn't offer me coffee. She pointed to a chair. "Sit down." "Sadie," she said, "I reviewed the documents your friend Jules sent over, and I pulled the probate records from the county archive this morning. We have a lot of ground to cover." I sat. My hands were gripping the strap of my purse so hard my knuckles were white. I felt like a child called to the principal's office, a feeling that had been my default state around authority figures since I was 5. "Is it bad?" I asked. "It is interesting," Mara said. She sat behind her desk, which was piled high with manila folders. "You told me you thought your parents owned everything, that you were just the daughter who didn't make the cut. That is what they told me." I said. Mara opened a folder and slid a photocopy across the desk. It was an old document. The typewriter ink faded to gray. "Your parents are liars," Mara said calmly, "but you already knew that. What you did not know is that your grandmother, Lenora Long, knew it too." I looked at the paper. It was a trust deed, dated 20 years ago. Lenora Long created the Pine Glass Trust 3 years before she died. Mara explained, "It holds 2 assets. First, the cabin at the lake. Second, a modest investment account intended to cover the property taxes and maintenance." She tapped the paper with a pen. "Here's the part that matters." She continued, "Lenora named your father, Gordon, as the primary trustee, but she added a contingency clause, a restrictive covenant. It says that if the primary trustee attempts to sell, encumber, or borrow against the principal asset, the cabin, without the unanimous consent of all living beneficiaries. The trust does not just block the sale. What does it do?" I asked. "It triggers an automatic removal of the primary trustee," Mara said, "and it installs the named successor trustee to take over immediately." I stared at her. "Who is the successor trustee?" "You are," Mara said. The room went silent. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. "Me?" I whispered, "but I was 13 when she died." Lenora played the long game. Mara said, "The trust stipulates that you assume the role upon reaching the age of 25. Until then, it was dormant. Your parents likely assumed you would never find out. They probably thought they could just sell the place quietly, pocket the money, and you would be none the wiser." I felt a physical blow to my chest. It wasn't just about the money, it was the architecture of the lie. For years, I had struggled. I had worked double shifts at a diner to pay for community college. I had clipped coupons to buy Holly's winter coats. I had borrowed money from Jules to pay my rent when I got divorced. And all that time, my parents had been sitting on a trust that listed me as the failsafe. They had watched me struggle, knowing I had legal power I didn't know about. And they had kept their mouths shut. They kept me poor, I said, my voice trembling. They kept me desperate, so I would not have the resources to fight them. "Control is a powerful drug," Mara said. and it looks like they are running out of their own supply. If they are trying to sell the cabin now, in a rush, over a holiday, it means they are desperate. They triggered the clause. Sadie, by attempting to sell without your consent. Gordon technically fired himself. You are not just a beneficiary. As of the moment they accepted that offer, you became the boss. I looked at the document again. My name. Sadie Long, typed by a grandmother who had barely spoken to me in her final years. Or so I thought. What do we do? I asked. We stop them, Mara said, but I need to warn you. The firm they are using, Harrow Lyle, is a factory. They do not care about the truth. They care about speed and intimidation. They will try to pressure you. They will tell you that you are ruining the family. They will threaten you with legal fees you cannot afford. Let them try, I said. Mara smiled, a small, grim expression. Good, because I just got a fax from them. They want a mediation meeting this afternoon at 2 o'clock. They claim it is to clarify a misunderstanding. It is not a misunderstanding. I said, no. Mara agreed. It is an ambush, and we are going to walk right into it. I left Mara's office and drove 40 minutes to West Alder, the suburb where I lived. It was a world away from Briar Glen. Here, the houses were small ranches with peeling paint, and the Christmas decorations were plastic Santa Clauses from the dollar store, not professional light displays. I let myself into my apartment. It was cold. I turned up the thermostat and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Marilyn, 1 from Evan, none from my father. I ignored them all. I went into the bedroom where Holly was still asleep in her nest of blankets. I had dropped her off with my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, early that morning so I could meet Mara, and Mrs. Gable had just brought her back. Holly stirred as I sat on the edge of the bed. Her hair was a tangled halo of static. "Mommy?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "Hey, Bug," I said softly. "Is Grandpa okay?" "He is stable," I said. "That is the word the doctors used. It means he is resting." "Are we going back to the big house?" she asked. "No," I said. I felt a fierce wave of protectiveness. "We are staying here. We are going to have our own Christmas. Better late than never. Right?" I spent the next 2 hours constructing a fortress of normalcy. I made hot cocoa with extra marshmallows. We watched a holiday movie about a dog who saved a bakery. I let Holly open the 3 presents I had placed under our tiny 2-foot plastic tree: a set of art markers, a new pair of sneakers, and a book about space. She was happy. She was resilient. She didn't know that her mother was preparing for war, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time I set a cup down, it rattled. I felt like I was vibrating on a frequency of pure rage. At 1 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was Jules. "Hey," I said, stepping into the bathroom and closing the door so Holly wouldn't hear. "I found something," Jules said without preamble. Her voice was tinny and fast. I ran a deeper credit check on Gordon, not just the standard bureaus, but the secondary markets. And, "Sadie, he is underwater," Jules said. "He took out a short-term private loan 6 months ago, the kind you get from a guy in a strip mall, not a bank. The interest rate is predatory. 40%. 40%? I gasped. "Why would he do that?" "To cover the payments on the Briar Glen house," Jules said. "He is leveraged to the hilt. But here's the kicker. The lender? It is an LLC called North Creek Capital." I looked up their filing. "The principal officer is a man named Silas Vane. I do not know that name." I said. "You might not," Jules said. "But you know his business. He is a developer. He has been buying up properties around Lake Pineglass for 2 years. He is building a luxury resort." The pieces clicked together in my mind like the tumblers of a lock. He borrowed money from the developer. I said, "And he put the cabin up as collateral, or he promised to sell it to settle the debt." Jules said, "That is why the rush. The loan is probably coming due. If he does not sell the cabin to Vane by the end of the year, he defaults. And if he defaults, he loses everything: the house, the cars, the image. He is broke." I whispered. "He is worse than broke," Jules said. he is beholden to a shark. Sadie, if you stop this sale, you are not just taking an asset, you are popping the balloon. His entire life is going to collapse. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I looked tired. There were dark circles under my eyes, but there was something else, too. A hardness that hadn't been there yesterday. He tried to sell my inheritance to pay for his lies. I said, "Exactly." Jules said, "Be careful at that meeting." Sadie, desperate men do dangerous things. The offices of Harrow Lyle were located in a glass tower in downtown, the kind of building that required a security badge just to use the elevator. Mara met me in the lobby. She was wearing a trench coat and carrying a battered leather briefcase. "Ready?" she asked. "No." I said, "Let us go." We rode the elevator to the 30th floor. The conference room was vast, with a view of the city skyline that screamed money. Marilyn and Evan were already there. Marilyn had changed out of her party dress into a severe black suit. She looked smaller than she had the night before, brittle and sharp. Evan sat next to her, staring at the polished mahogany table. He looked nauseous. Across from them sat a man who could only be the lawyer. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car, and he had a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Ms. Long," he said, standing up and extending a hand. "I am Arthur Harrow. We are so glad you could make it on such short notice." I didn't shake his hand. I sat down. Mara sat next to me. "Let us skip the pleasantries." "Arthur," Mara said, opening her briefcase, "my client is here as a courtesy." Arthur smiled, retracting his hand. "Of course. We just want to resolve this little hiccup. It seems there has been a great deal of confusion regarding the Pine Glass property." "There is no confusion." I said, "The trust is clear." Marilyn made a sound in her throat, a sharp click of annoyance. "Sadie, please, do not pretend you understand legal documents. You are a barista." "I am an office manager," I said calmly, "and I can read." Arthur held up a hand. "Please, let us keep emotions out of this. The situation is simple. Gordon Long, acting as trustee, secured a fantastic offer for the cabin. It is a derelict property. It is a drain on the family resources. This sale is a blessing." "For whom?" Mara asked. "The trust or the trustee?" "For the beneficiaries," Arthur said smoothly, "which includes Sadie." He slid a document across the table. It was a single page. "This is a simple consent form," Arthur said. "It acknowledges that Sadie Long agrees to the sale and waives her right to interfere with the closing. In exchange, the family is prepared to offer a generous settlement from the proceeds. $20,000. 20,000, I repeated. "It is a lot of money," Evan said softly. He looked up at me. "Sadie, it could help you. With Holly. With everything." I looked at my brother. His eyes were pleading. He wasn't malicious. He just wanted the tension to stop. He wanted the boat to stop rocking. Mara put her hand on the document, pinning it to the table. "This is not just a consent form," Mara said, her voice turning to ice. She pointed to a paragraph at the bottom. "Look at the language here. The undersigned waives any and all rights to retroactive accounting and releases the trustee from liability for past management of the trust assets." She looked at Arthur. "You are asking her to sign a release of liability. Standard boilerplate," Arthur said, shrugging. "It is a get-out-of-jail-free card," Mara countered. "If she signs this, she can never ask where the money from the investment account went. She can never ask why the property taxes haven't been paid in 5 years. She can never ask why Gordon took out a personal loan against a trust asset." The room went deadly silent. Marilyn went pale. Her mouth opened. But no sound came out. Arthur's smile vanished. "Where are you getting your information?" "Public records," Mara said, "and basic math. You are trying to bury a breach of fiduciary duty." I looked at Marilyn. "Did you spend it?" I asked. "The money Grandma left for the upkeep. Did you spend it on the renovations? On the cars?" Marilyn slammed her hand on the table. "It was our money. We raised you. We paid for your food, your clothes. You ungrateful little—" "Gordon stole from the trust," I said, cutting her off. And now he needs to sell the cabin to cover his tracks. That is what this is, Sadie, Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming menacingly low. If you block this sale, the offer evaporates. The property will be foreclosed on. The family gets nothing. You get nothing. You are burning down the house to spite your parents. I am not burning it down. I said, I am putting out the fire you started. I stood up. I am not signing. I said, Sadie! Marilyn screamed. She stood up, her chair clattering back. If you walk out that door, you are killing your father. The stress will kill him. Do you want that on your conscience? I looked at her, really looked at her. You told me to leave and never return. I said, I am just following instructions. I walked out. Mara followed me, scooping up the consent form and shoving it into her bag. I made it to the elevator before my knees gave out. I leaned against the wall, gasping for air. The adrenaline was crashing. Sadie. I turned. Evan had followed us out. He was standing in the hallway, looking lost. Evan, go back inside, I said. He shook his head. I didn't know. He said, his voice was trembling. I swear to God, Sadie, I didn't know about the loan. I didn't know you were on the trust. I looked at him. I believed him. Evan was the golden child. But that just meant he was the trophy. You don't tell the trophy the game is rigged. They told me it was just some old paperwork. Evan said, they said you were being difficult because you were jealous. I am not jealous. Evan, I said, I am tired. He looked at his shoes. Dad is really sick. Sadie, he woke up for a minute this morning. He looked terrified. Not of dying, of this. He should be. I said, Evan looked up, tears in his eyes. What are you going to do? I am going to protect Holly. I said, you should go back inside. Evan, before she turns on you. 2. He watched me as the elevator doors closed. He looked like a little boy left behind at the mall. That night, the silence in my apartment felt heavy. Holly was asleep. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, surrounded by boxes. I was looking for comfort. I was looking for proof that I came from somewhere real, that I wasn't just a glitch in the long family matrix. I pulled out an old plastic tote from the top of my closet. It was filled with the debris of my childhood, things I had managed to take with me when I moved out at 18, old report cards. A dried corsage from prom, a ribbon from a track meet, and at the bottom, a small wooden box. I opened it. Inside were a few photos and a stack of holiday cards. I sifted through them. Most were generic cards from distant relatives. Love, Aunt Sarah, best wishes, the Millers. Then I saw it. A card with a vintage illustration of a cardinal on a snowy branch. The handwriting on the envelope was shaky, spiderweb thin. To Sadie, it was from Lenora, my grandmother. I opened it. I hadn't looked at this card in 15 years. I remembered getting it the Christmas before she died. I remembered Marilyn scoffing at it, saying, Mother always buys the cheap cards. I read the message inside. My dearest Sadie, the world can be very loud, especially in this house. Do not let them drown out your own voice. You have a spine made of iron. Child, I see it, even if they do not. One day, you will need to stand tall. When that day comes, remember, the trees at Pineglass have deep roots. So do you. Love, Grandma Lenora. I stared at the words, the trees at Pineglass. She hadn't just left me a cabin. She had left me a weapon. She had known. She had watched Marilyn's vanity and Gordon's weakness, and she had known that one day they would try to consume everything. She had secured the cabin not to keep it in the family, but to keep the family from destroying it. And she had made me the guardian. I ran my thumb over the ink. It was blue ballpoint, pressed hard into the paper. She tried to protect me. I whispered to the empty room. For the first time since the dinner, I cried, not out of anger, but out of relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the unstable, drama-prone daughter. I was the one Lenora had bet on. I wiped my eyes and put the card back in the box. Tomorrow, I would go to Pineglass. I needed to see what I was fighting for. I needed to see the roots. My phone buzzed on the floor next to me. A text from Mara. Harrow Lyle just filed an emergency motion. They are trying to get a judge to force the signature. Court hearing is set for next week. Get some sleep. The war starts Monday. I looked at the text. Then I looked at the card. Let them come. I thought. I stood up and went to the window. The streetlights of West Alder were humming. I wasn't Sadie the victim anymore. I was the successor trustee, and I was done asking for permission to exist. The tires of Mara's SUV crunched over the hard-packed snow of the driveway. A sound that was loud in the silence of the winter woods. We had been driving for 2 hours, leaving the gray slush of the city for the pristine, blinding white of the mountains. Pine-glass cabins sat at the end of the lane, an A-frame structure of dark cedar that looked like a ship run aground in a sea of ice. I sat in the passenger seat, my heart doing a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. In the back, Holly was humming, her nose pressed against the cold glass. "Look at the trees. Mommy!" she shouted. "They are wearing marshmallow coats. It is a snow adventure." "Bug," I said, forcing a brightness into my voice that I did not feel. "Just like we talked about. You are the explorer, and I am the assistant." I wanted to keep the fear out of the car. To Holly, this was a spontaneous day trip. To me, it was an excavation. Mara parked the car next to a snowbank that had hardened into ice. She turned off the engine. The silence rushed back in, heavy and pine-scented. "Are you ready?" Mara asked quietly. I nodded. "I do not think I have been here since I was 12. I said, "It looks solid." Mara said, "Evaluating the roofline. Your father kept the structure sound. At least, we got out. The air was biting, the kind of cold that freezes the inside of your nose instantly." I helped Holly into her snow pants and zipped her coat up to her chin. "Okay, explorer," I said. "Your mission is to inspect the front yard for optimal snowman conditions. Can you do that while Mara and I check the inside for dust bunnies?" "Aye, aye, Captain." Holly saluted and ran toward a patch of untouched snow, her boots making fresh tracks in the white blanket. I watched her for a moment, making sure she was safe, then turned to the cabin. The key I had found in the envelope, the one the nurse had given me, slid into the lock with a heavy, satisfying click. The door swung open. The smell hit me first. Cedar, wood smoke, and something sharp and chemical, like lemon polish. It was the smell of my childhood summers, preserved in amber. We walked in. The main room was dominated by a massive stone fireplace and a wall of windows that looked out over the frozen lake. The furniture was the same stuff from 20 years ago. Heavy plaid couches, a coffee table made of a slice of redwood, a braided rug. It was a time capsule. I walked around the room, touching the backs of chairs. Ghosts started to flicker in my peripheral vision. I saw my brother Evan, 5 years old, running in circles with a toy boat. I saw my father, Gordon, sitting in the leather armchair with a drink, staring out at the water, ignoring everyone. I saw my mother, Marilyn, posing for a photo on the deck, adjusting her hair, checking the lighting, making sure we all smiled wide enough to look happy. I remembered the photos from those trips. In every single one, I was on the edge of the frame, half my shoulder cut off, or looking away, or blurry. I was the extra person, the one they brought because they had to, not because I completed the set. "Sadie," Mara called out from the kitchen. I shook off the memory and went to her. She was looking at a calendar on the wall. It was turned to July of last year. "Someone has been here recently," Mara said. "The pilot light on the stove is on. The heat is set to 55 degrees to keep the pipes from freezing. This is not abandoned. Gordon must have been maintaining it," I said, "or paying someone to." I walked into the small hallway that led to the bedrooms. The floorboards creaked in a pattern I remembered. Third board, then the fifth. My body knew this house better than my mind did. I went into the room that had been my grandmother Lenora's when she stayed with us. It was small. Facing the woods, there was a single bed with a quilt, a nightstand, and a rocking chair. I sat in the chair. It rocked back with a groan. I remembered something, a memory so sharp it made me gasp. I was 10 years old. I was crying because Marilyn had told me my hair looked like a rat's nest before a dinner party. I had hidden in this room. Lenora had found me. She didn't hug me. She wasn't a hugging woman. She had sat on the bed and told me a story about a fox who outsmarted a pack of hounds. The fox does not need to be bigger, she had said. It just needs to know where the holes in the fence are. She had pointed to the baseboard near the closet. Like that one, she had whispered. I stood up. I walked to the closet. The baseboard looked normal, but when I crouched down and hooked my fingernail under the top edge, it gave. It was loose. My heart hammered. I pulled gently. The piece of wood came away, revealing a hollow space between the studs. Inside, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag, was a stack of papers. I pulled them out. The dust motes danced in the shaft of winter sunlight coming through the window. Mara appeared in the doorway. What did you find? The foxhole, I whispered. We went back to the kitchen table. I unwrapped the plastic. It was a bundle of letters, handwritten on Lenora's stationery. They were addressed to her sister in Ohio, but there were no stamps. They had never been mailed. I picked up the top one. It was dated 4 years before she died. Dear Janice, I am keeping these here because if I leave them at the house in Briar Glen, Marilyn will read them. She goes through my purse when she thinks I'm asleep. She is looking for the account numbers. I looked at Mara. She goes through my purse. Read the next paragraph. Mara said gently, Marilyn is obsessed. She has bought new furniture 3 times this year. Gordon just agrees. He nods and signs the checks because he is terrified of her temper. He would agree to set the house on fire if she told him it would improve the lighting. I felt a coldness settle in my stomach that had nothing to do with the drafty cabin. Lenora had seen it. She had seen the dynamic I thought I had imagined. I picked up another letter. This one was dated only a month before she died. I have made a change to the trust today. I went to the lawyer without telling Gordon. I have added Sadie's name. My hand shook as I read the words. I look at that girl and I see the only person in this family with a conscience. Marilyn will sell everything to fund a life that looks expensive. She will eat the seed corn. I have to put a lock on the door. Sadie is the lock. She does not know it yet, but she is the only thing standing between this family and ruin. I put the letter down. Tears pricked my eyes. She did not name me because she loved me best, I said, my voice thick. She named me because she knew I was the only one who wouldn't help Marilyn spend it. She named you because she trusted you. Mara corrected. She knew you were strong enough to say no, which is exactly what you're doing. I looked out the window. Holly was rolling a giant snowball near the tree line. She looked small and bright against the gray woods. The timeline makes sense now. I said, the Christmas dinner, the humiliation. Mara nodded. Explain it to me. They knew the developer was pressuring Gordon, I said, piecing it together. The loan was due. They had to sell the cabin by the end of the year to pay him back, but the title company flagged the trust. They realized they needed my signature. So they staged a fight, Mara said. They staged a nuclear explosion. I said, Marilyn humiliated me in front of everyone. She told me to leave and never return. She wanted me to pack up, take Holly, and drive back to the city. She wanted me gone so I wouldn't be around when the injunction notice arrived. They wanted you to default, Mara said. If they could prove to a judge that the successor trustee was unreachable or estranged, they might have been able to get an emergency order to bypass your signature. They tried to provoke me into disappearing. I said, and it almost worked. If Dad hadn't collapsed, if he hadn't collapsed, Mara said, you would be halfway to a new life, and they would be signing the deed over to this developer, wiping out your inheritance and the scholarship fund Lenora wanted to build. A car door slammed outside. I froze. I stood up and went to the window. A black luxury SUV was parked behind Mara's car. It was blocking us in. Marilyn was getting out of the driver's side. She was wearing a full-length fur coat and high-heeled boots that were sinking into the snow. She looked ridiculous, and she looked terrifying. She is here, I said. Mara stood up and smoothed her jacket. Stay calm. Do not let her bait you. Remember, You hold the cards. I am going to get Holly. I said. I grabbed my coat and ran out the side door. I reached Holly just as she was putting a pinecone nose on her snowman. Hey, Bug, I said, trying to keep my breath steady. Grandma is here. Grandma? Holly looked up, surprised. Is she mad? No, I lied. She just needs to talk to me about business. Why do not you go into the loft? There's a whole stack of comic books up there I bet you haven't seen, and you can wear my headphones and listen to your music. Okay, Holly said. I ushered her inside through the back door and settled her in the loft with the iPad and noise-canceling headphones. I waited until I saw her nodding to the beat of a pop song before I went back down to the main room. Marilyn was already inside. She had let herself in with her own key. She was standing in the center of the room, breathing hard. Her face was flushed, her lipstick stark against her pale skin. Mara was standing by the fireplace, arms crossed, looking bored. Where is she? Marilyn demanded, spinning around as I walked in from the hallway. Holly is upstairs, I said quietly. Keep your voice down. You broke in, Marilyn hissed. She pointed a gloved finger at me. You broke into my property. I could have you arrested for trespassing. I am the successor trustee, I said. I have a legal right to inspect the trust assets, and you know that. Mother, do not call me that. She spat. A daughter helps her family. A daughter does not steal from her dying father. I am not stealing. I said, I am reading. I picked up the letters from the table. Marilyn's eyes snapped to them. She recognized the handwriting instantly. Where did you get those? She whispered. She hid them. I said, from you, because she knew you would burn them. Marilyn lunged forward. Give them to me. Mara stepped between us. Her movement was small but absolute. Mrs. Long, Mara said, I would advise you to take a step back. Assaulting a trustee in the presence of legal counsel is a poor strategy. Marilyn stopped. She was trembling. She looked around the cabin, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. You do not understand, she said, her voice shaking. We have to sell. The deal expires tomorrow. If we do not close, the interest rate on the loan doubles. We will lose the house in Briar Glen. We will lose the cars. I looked at her. For the first time, I didn't see the imperious matriarch who judged my shoes and my job. I saw a woman standing on a trapdoor. You borrowed money from a shark. I said, to maintain an image. We did it for the family. Marilyn cried, to keep up our standing. Your father is a respected man. We could not live in a shack. You have a 3,000 square foot house. I said, you are not in a shack. You are in a delusion. Sadie, please, she begged. The anger evaporated, replaced by that same desperate pleading I had seen at the hospital. Just sign the consent. We can sell the cabin, pay off the debt, and have enough left over to start fresh. I will give you half of what is left. I swear. I looked at the letters in my hand. She will eat the seed corn. If we sell now, I said, does the money go to the trust account, or does it go to North Creek Capital? Marilyn hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. It goes to the debt, she whispered. Then the answer is no. I said. Marilyn let out a scream of frustration. She grabbed a ceramic vase from the table and threw it. It shattered against the stone fireplace, shards of pottery exploding across the hearth. You are ruining us, she screamed. You spiteful, jealous little girl. You want to see us fail. You have always hated us because we were special, and you were nothing. The words hung in the air. 20 years ago, that would have broken me. I would have cried. I would have begged for forgiveness. But today, I just felt tired. I am not nothing. I said, I am the one with the signature. I walked over to the table and picked up a notepad. I wrote quickly. Here's the deal. I said. I ripped the page off and held it out. I will agree to a sale. I said, but not to your developer, and not on your timeline. We put the cabin on the open market. We get fair market value. The proceeds go into the trust account, managed by a third party. We pay off Dad's loan only if a judge orders it, and the rest goes to the scholarship fund Lenora wanted. Marilyn stared at the paper. That will take months, she said. "We do not have months." "Then you should have thought of that before you spent money you didn't have." I said. Marilyn looked at me with pure hatred. "I will destroy you in court," she hissed. "I will tell everyone you are mentally incompetent. I will tell them you manipulated your grandmother. I will make sure you never work in this town again. You already tried that on Christmas." I said. "It didn't work." Marilyn turned and stormed out. The door slammed so hard the windows rattled. I stood there, listening to the silence return. Mara exhaled. Well, that went well. I looked at the shattered vase. It was over. The illusion of the happy family was gone. "Sadie?" I turned. Evan was standing in the open doorway. I hadn't seen him come in. He must have been waiting in the car. He looked frozen, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his coat. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Evan nodded. He looked at the floor, then at the shattered vase. "I drove her up here," he said quietly. "She was screaming the whole way. She told me the plan." "What plan?" I asked. He looked up at me. His face was pale. "She and the lawyer," Evan said. "They were talking about filing for a guardianship. They want to claim you are unstable. They have been saving your texts. Anytime you got angry, or cried, or asked for help with money, they are going to edit them together to make you look crazy." I felt a cold shiver go down my spine. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Evan looked at Mara, then back at me. "Because she said she would do it to me. Too, if I didn't help her." He stepped into the room. He looked small. "I am scared. Sadie," he whispered, "I do not know how to be poor. I have never had a real job. I work for Dad's consulting firm, but it is just a payroll slot. If the money goes, I have nothing." "You have a degree," I said. "You have a brain." Evan laughed, a bitter sound. "I have a leased BMW and a credit card bill I can't pay. I am just as trapped as they are." "Then help me," I said. "Help me stop them." Evan shook his head. "I can't. She controls everything. But—" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. He didn't light one. He just turned it over in his hands. "The developer." "Vane?" Evan said. "He is not just a lender. He is Dad's old partner from the 90s, the one who went to jail for fraud. He changed his name." My eyes widened. "Does Dad know?" I asked. Evan nodded. "Dad knows. That is why he is so scared. It is not just debt. It is blackmail. Vane has dirt on Dad. If the sale doesn't go through, Vane releases the files." "What files?" Mara asked sharply. "I do not know," Evan said. "But whatever it is bad enough that Dad was willing to sell you out to keep it buried." Evan looked at me, his eyes wet. "I am sorry. Sadie, I am a coward, but I thought you should know who you are fighting." He turned and walked out into the snow. A moment later, I heard the SUV start up and drive away. I stood in the center of the cabin. The light was fading, the shadows stretching long across the floor. I looked at Mara. "Blackmail," I said. "That changes the landscape." Mara said, "It is not just a property dispute anymore. It is a criminal conspiracy." I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the calm of the bottom. I had hit the bedrock of my family's corruption, and there was nowhere left to fall. I walked over to the fireplace and kicked a shard of the broken vase into the ashes. "They wanted me to be the villain," I said. "They wanted to paint me as the ungrateful daughter who ruined the family." I looked at Mara. "Fine," I said. "I will be the villain." "What do you want to do?" Mara asked. "I want to file a formal request for a full forensic accounting of the trust." I said, "Going back 20 years, I want every check, every withdrawal, every transfer documented. That will trigger a public hearing." Mara warned, "It will be in the papers. The scandal will be massive." "Good." I said, "I want a review of trustee conduct." I continued. "And I want to file an emergency motion to freeze all assets held by Gordon and Marilyn Long until the audit is complete. I am freezing them out." I said, "If they want to play games with money, let us see how they play with none." Mara smiled, a slow, sharp smile. I will draft the motion tonight, she said. We can file Monday morning. I went to the loft. Holly was asleep on the beanbag chair. The headphones slipped down around her neck. She looked peaceful. I picked her up. She was heavy, dead weight in my arms. We carried her out to the car. The sun had set, and the woods were blue and black. The cold was absolute. As we drove away, I looked back at the cabin. It was dark now, blending into the trees. I thought about Lenora. I thought about the fox and the hounds. I wasn't running anymore. I was turning around to bite. Drive fast. Mara, I said softly, we have work to do. Monday morning arrived not with the warmth of the sun, but with the sharp crack of a legal whip. I was in the kitchen making oatmeal for Holly, stirring the pot with a wooden spoon and watching the steam rise, when the doorbell rang. It was 7 o'clock. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the door. I knew better than to open it blindly. I peered through the peephole. It was a process server. I recognized the bored posture and the thick envelope in his hand. I opened the door. Sadie Long? He asked. Yes, I said. You have been served. He thrust the envelope at me and walked away before I could even take a breath. The morning air was freezing, biting at my bare ankles. I closed the door and locked it. Deadbolt, chain, handle. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the package. It was from Harrow and Lyle. The header was in bold, aggressive font. Notice of motion for restraining order and protection from harassment. I felt the blood drain from my face. Harassment? I turned the page. There, typed out in black and white, was a story I did not recognize. It was a funhouse mirror version of my life. The respondent, Sadie Long, has engaged in a pattern of erratic and threatening behavior toward the petitioners, Marilyn and Gordon Long. Exhibit A. Text messages sent by respondent. I looked at the texts. They were real messages I had sent over the years, but they had been cherry-picked, stripped of context, and arranged to make me look deranged. Text from Sadie. May 14th, 2023. Why won't you answer me? I am desperate. I need to talk to you right now. I remembered that text. Holly had a fever of 104, and my car had broken down on the way to the emergency room. I had been begging them for a ride. Text from Sadie. December 25th, 2025. I am not leaving. You can't make me. That was from Christmas night. When Marilyn had tried to force me out of the house before the ambulance arrived, the affidavit went on. It claimed I had invaded the family property at Pineglass Cabin. It claimed I had verbally assaulted Marilyn Long in a threatening manner, causing her emotional distress. It claimed I was unstable and obsessed with the family finances. They were trying to paint me as a stalker, a dangerous, unhinged daughter who needed to be kept away by the force of law. My hands started to shake, not the subtle tremor of anxiety, but the violent shake of adrenaline. If a judge granted this, it wouldn't just keep me away from them, it would destroy my credibility in the trust case. Who trusts a trustee with a restraining order against her? Mommy? Holly's voice cut through the fog. She was standing in the doorway, holding her stuffed rabbit by the ears. Is the oatmeal ready? She asked. I shoved the papers under a stack of mail. I took a deep breath, forcing my heart rate to slow down. I put on a smile. It felt tight, like a mask that didn't quite fit, but it was enough for an 8-year-old before breakfast. It is ready, Bug, I said. And I put extra brown sugar in it because it is a Monday. I watched her eat. I braided her hair. I packed her lunchbox with a note that said, "You are my sunshine." I walked her to the bus stop and waved until the yellow bus disappeared around the corner. Then I went back inside, locked the door, and called Mara. They are trying to break you, Mara said, her voice coming through the phone with the tinny quality of a speakerphone. I was pacing my small living room, the legal notice clutched in my hand. It is working, I said. Mara, these texts, they make me look crazy. They make you look human, Mara corrected, and we will prove the context. But Sadie, listen to me. This is a standard tactic. It is called DARVO, deny, attack. And reverse victim and offender. Marilyn is the aggressor, so she is painting herself as the victim to put you on the defensive. It feels real. I said, that is the point. Mara said, they want you to panic. They want you to send an angry text right now so they can add it to the file. They want you to storm over to their house and scream so they can call the police. Are you going to do that? No, I said. I am standing in my living room. I am documenting everything. Good, Mara said, because while they were busy cutting and pasting text messages, I got a phone call. From who? I asked. Doctor Nolan Rusk, she said. Your father's cardiologist. I stopped pacing. Doctor Rusk? Why would he call you? He called me because he is a doctor, not a lawyer, and he has a conscience, Mara said. He treated Gordon the night of the collapse. Apparently, when Gordon was coming out of the anesthesia after the angiogram, he was agitated. He was muttering things. What things? I asked. He kept grabbing the nurse's hand. Mara said, and he kept saying, Marilyn can't sell it. Lenora made sure. Tell her Lenora made sure. I felt a chill run down my spine. He knew, I whispered. He knew everything. Mara said, Doctor. Rusk said Gordon was lucid enough to be terrified. He wasn't confused about the trust. He was confessing. He knows the sale is illegal, and Rusk is willing to testify to that statement if we subpoena him. He does not want to be part of a fraud. That is huge, I said. It is, Mara agreed. But I found something else, too. I have been digging into the trust's financial history, like you asked. It took some doing. But I got the bank records for the last 10 years. Did Marilyn drain it? I asked, bracing myself for the answer. Yes and no, Mara said. There are withdrawals for maintenance that look suspicious, likely funneled into Marilyn's personal accounts. But there is a recurring outflow that I didn't expect, every month, for the last 15 years. A check for $500 has been sent to an organization called Winterline Outreach. Winterline? I asked. I have never heard of it. Neither had I. Mara said, it is a tiny nonprofit based in Briar Glen. I looked them up. They provide emergency heating assistance for low-income families in the county. They pay for oil and wood when people run out in the winter. Lenora, I said softly. Exactly, Mara said. Your grandmother was using the trust to keep poor families warm, and she was doing it anonymously. The checks were just issued from the trust account. No name attached. I sat down on the couch. I thought about the fur coats Marilyn wore. I thought about the heating bill I struggled to pay every January. And I thought about Lenora, secretly sending warmth to strangers. She was good. I said, she was actually good. And that is why we are going to win, Mara said, because we are not just fighting for a cabin. Sadie, we are fighting for her legacy. Now, put the restraining order notice in a drawer. I will handle the response. You just focus on being the sane one. 2 days later, the phone rang again. It wasn't Mara. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. The name Mom flashed with a cheerful innocence that belied the legal war she had declared. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the notification popped up. I pressed play, my thumb hovering over the save button. Sadie. Marilyn's voice was soft, almost tremulous. It is Mom. Listen, things have gotten out of hand. The lawyers, they are so aggressive. Your father and I just want to talk. We are a family. Sadie, we shouldn't be fighting in court. Please, meet us for lunch. Just to talk. No lawyers. Just us. It was a performance. I knew that. But there was a hook in it. The lawyers are so aggressive. She was trying to distance herself from the very weapon she had fired at me. I called Mara. Go, Mara said. What? I asked. I thought you said no contact. Go, Mara repeated. But bring a recording device. In this state, as long as one party consents, you can record a conversation. That party is you. Let them talk. Let them think they are charming you. They might slip up. They might admit to the loan or the deal with the developer. It is a trap, I said. Of course it is, Mara said. But you are the one setting the snare this time. I agreed to meet them at the Gilded Fork. a pretentious bistro in downtown Briar Glen where Marilyn liked to be seen. I arrived 5 minutes early. I wore my best blazer, a thrift store find that I had tailored myself, and I pinned a small digital recorder inside my interior pocket. They were already there, Marilyn and Gordon. My father looked terrible. He was pale, his skin hanging loosely on his frame, and he was sitting in a wheelchair. It was the first time I had seen him since the ambulance took him away. "Sadie," Marilyn said, standing up and reaching for my hands. I stepped back, keeping my hands firmly at my sides. "Hello, Mother? Hello, Dad? Sit, Marilyn said, ignoring my rejection. She gestured to the chair opposite them. Gordon gave me a weak nod. He looked drugged, his eyes glassy. I sat down. I ordered an iced tea. I waited. "We missed you," Marilyn said. "It has been so quiet at the house. You filed for a restraining order against me on Monday." I said flatly. Marilyn waved her hand as if swatting away a fly. "Oh, that was Arthur's idea. You know how lawyers are. They overreact. We can drop that immediately. We just want this ugliness to end. Then stop the sale." I said. Gordon flinched. Marilyn's smile tightened. "Sadie, darling," Marilyn said, leaning in, "you do not understand the pressure we are under. The market is volatile. If we do not sell the cabin now, we lose a tremendous opportunity, and we want to share that opportunity with you." She reached into her purse and pulled out a check. She slid it across the white tablecloth. I looked at it. It was made out to Sadie Long. The amount was $50,000. "That is a lot of money." I said. "It is a fresh start." Marilyn said, "For you and Holly, you could move out of that apartment. You could get a reliable car. You could put it away for her college." I looked at the check. It was tempting. It was more money than I made in a year. It was safety. It was easy. But it was blood money. "Where did this come from?" I asked. "You do not have $50,000. That is why you are selling the cabin." Marilyn's eyes narrowed. "We have resources. Sadie, we are not destitute. Is this from the loan?" I asked. "The one from North Creek Capital?" Marilyn froze. Gordon made a low choking sound in his throat. "Who told you that?" Marilyn hissed. "It does not matter." I said, "I know about the loan. I know about the debt. And I know that this check is just a bribe to get me to sign the consent form so you can pay off Silas Vane." Marilyn snatched the check back. Her face twisted into something ugly. "You are a fool," she said. "You are a self-righteous little fool. You would rather see us ruined than take a helping hand." "This is not help," I said. "This is a transaction. You are trying to buy my signature because you know you can't legally sell without it." I looked at my father. "Dad," I said, "did you know about Winterline Outreach?" Gordon looked up. His eyes cleared for a second. A look of profound sadness washed over his face. "Lenora," he whispered. She helped people. She did." I said, "And she wanted us to help people too, not just ourselves." "Gordon, stop it," Marilyn snapped. She turned to me. "You are ungrateful. We gave you life. We gave you a home. And this is how you repay us? By digging through our private business? By humiliating us?" I stood up. "I am not the one humiliating you." "Mother," I said, "you are doing that all by yourself." I walked out of the restaurant. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. I got into my car and drove 2 blocks before I pulled over and turned off the recorder. I had it. I had her admitting the restraining order was a tactic. I had her offering a bribe, and I had her reaction to the name Silas Vane. It was enough to destroy her credibility, but it still broke my heart, because a small, stupid part of me had hoped, just for a second, that they actually wanted to see me. That night, the doorbell rang again. I checked the peephole. It wasn't a process server. It was Evan. He looked like a ghost. He was wearing a hoodie with the hood pulled up, and he kept looking over his shoulder at the street. I opened the door. "Let me in," he said. I stepped back. He walked in and went straight to the blinds, peeking out to make sure no one had followed him. "Evan, what is going on?" I asked. He turned to me. His hands were shaking. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a crumbled piece of paper. "I stole this," he said, "from her desk, while she was at the lawyer's office." "What is it?" "It is a draft contract," Evan said, "between Marilyn and Vane." I took the paper. It was a consulting agreement. It stated that upon the successful closing of the sale of the Pine Glass property to North Creek Capital, Marilyn Long would be retained as a design consultant for the new resort project. Her fee was listed at $200,000. She is getting a kickback. I whispered, "It is not just a sale to pay off Dad's debt." Evan said, "She negotiated a side deal. She is selling the family heritage, and she is getting paid a bonus to do it." He sat down on my couch and put his head in his hands. "She told me she was doing it for us." Evan said, "She said we were drowning, but she was just making sure she had a golden parachute." "Does Dad know?" I asked. "I do not think so." Evan said, "Dad is just trying to stay out of jail. Marilyn is the one trying to get rich." He looked up at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. "I can't testify." "Sadie," he said, "I can't stand up in court and say this. She is still my mother. She pays my rent. If I turn on her publicly, I am dead." I looked at the document. It was unsigned, but it was damning. "You do not have to testify," I said. "You just gave me the gun. I will pull the trigger." Evan stood up. He looked at Holly's drawing on the fridge. It was a picture of a house with smoke coming out of the chimney. "You are a good mom. Sadie," he said, "you are the only real one of us." He left as quietly as he had come. The morning of the hearing, the sky was a bruised purple. I woke up early and dressed in a navy blue suit. It was conservative, boring, and respectful. Holly was sitting on the bed, watching me put on my earrings. "Mommy?" she asked. "Yes, baby? Why is Grandma mad at Christmas?" I froze. I turned to look at her. She was 8 years old, but she felt the vibrations of the family tension like a seismograph. I sat down on the bed next to her. I thought about lying. I thought about telling her Grandma wasn't mad, but I had promised myself I would break the cycle of lies, of appearances, of secrets. "Grandma is not mad at Christmas," I said gently. "Grandma is scared." "Scared of what?" Holly asked. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes." I said, "Big mistakes, and when they get scared about those mistakes, they try to fix them in the wrong way. They try to hide them. Is that why she yelled at you?" "Yes," I said. "She wanted me to help her hide the mistake, but I said no. Because in this family, our family, me and you, we do not hide things. We tell the truth, even when it is hard." "Is she going to yell at you again?" Holly asked, her voice small. "Probably," I said, "but it is okay, because I am safe, and you are safe, and we are going to make sure that the truth comes out, and once the truth is out, the scary part goes away." Holly nodded. She reached out and hugged me. "You are brave, Mommy." I held her tight. "I am brave because of you." I thought. The courtroom was wood-paneled and smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. Judge Holloway sat on the bench, a woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and an expression of permanent skepticism. Arthur Harrow was there, looking slick and confident. Marilyn sat beside him, dressed in black, clutching a tissue. She looked frail. It was a good costume. Mara sat beside me. She opened her briefcase and laid out our exhibits. The letters from Lenora, the bank records showing the payments to Winterline, the affidavit from Dr. Rusk, the recording of the lunch meeting, and the draft contract Evan had stolen. The hearing began. Arthur started with the restraining order. He painted a picture of me as a jealous, estranged daughter who was harassing her grieving mother. He read the texts. He used words like unhinged and threatening. Marilyn took the stand. She cried. She dabbed at her eyes. "I just want peace," she sobbed. "I just want my daughter to leave us alone. We are trying to sell an old cabin to pay for my husband's medical bills, and she is blocking it out of spite." It was compelling. If I didn't know her, I would have believed her. Then it was Mara's turn. She didn't make a speech. She just started submitting documents. "Your Honor," Mara said, We have evidence that this is not a simple property dispute. This is an attempt to defraud a trust. She presented the trust deed with the contingency clause. She presented Dr. Rusk's statement. She presented the recording of the bribe. And then, she presented the consulting contract. Judge Holloway picked up the contract. She read it. Her eyebrows went up. Ms. Long. The judge asked Marilyn, "Is this your name on this draft agreement?" Marilyn looked at the paper. She went pale. I have never seen that," she stammered. "It was found on your desk." "Judge," Mara said, "it outlines a $200,000 payment to Marilyn Long personally, contingent on the sale of the trust asset. That is a direct conflict of interest and a breach of fiduciary duty." Arthur tried to object. He claimed the document was hearsay. He claimed it was stolen. Judge Holloway silenced him with a look. "And regarding the harassment claims," Mara said, "I would like to submit the full transcripts of the text messages." She handed over the logs. The judge read them. She saw the context. The sick child. The broken car. Judge Holloway took off her glasses. She looked at Marilyn. "Mrs. Long," she said. Her voice was cool and dry. "This court does not look kindly on the weaponization of protective orders." The judge turned to me. "Ms. Sadie Long," she said, "you are the named successor trustee?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice was steady. "And what is your goal here?" the judge asked. "Do you want the money?" I stood up. I looked at Marilyn. I looked at the judge. "No, Your Honor," I said. "I do not want the money. I want an accounting. My grandmother created this trust to help people. She gave to the poor in this county for 20 years. My mother has stopped those payments. She is trying to sell the asset to a developer who will turn it into a luxury resort, and she is taking a kickback to do it." I took a breath. I want the trust honored. I want the truth exposed, and I want to make sure that my father's mistakes do not destroy what my grandmother built. I am not here for revenge. I am here to set a boundary. The courtroom was silent. Judge Holloway nodded. She banged her gavel. "The motion for a restraining order is denied with prejudice." She ruled. Marilyn gasped. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am issuing a temporary injunction on the sale of the Pine Glass property. I am ordering an immediate, independent forensic accounting of the Lenora Long Family Trust, all assets held by the trust, and all personal assets of the current trustees, are frozen pending the results of this audit." "Frozen?" Marilyn shrieked. "You can't do that. We have bills." "You should have thought of that before you breached your fiduciary duty." "Mrs. Long," the judge said. "Next case." We walked out of the courtroom. I felt light. I felt clean. But as we reached the hallway, Marilyn caught up to us. She wasn't crying anymore. The mask was gone. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You think you won?" she hissed. Grabbing my arm, I pulled away. "I did win." "Mother, it is over." "It is not over," she said. Her voice was low, trembling with a dark, frantic energy. "You think you can freeze me out? You think you can take my life away?" She stepped closer. "I will burn it all down before I let you have it," she whispered. "I will make sure there is nothing left for you to save." She turned and ran toward the elevators. Pulling her phone out of her purse, she dialed a number furiously. I watched her go. Mara looked at me. "That was a threat." She said, "I know." I said, I felt a sudden, sharp pang of fear. The judge had stopped the sale. But she hadn't stopped Marilyn. And a cornered animal doesn't just bite, it attacks the thing you love most. "I need to pick up Holly." I said, "Right now." I ran toward the stairs. The victory felt fragile, like ice on a lake in spring. It was solid for now, but I could hear the cracks forming underneath. Marilyn had one move left, and I had a terrible feeling I knew what it was. The notification arrived on my phone at 6 a.m, vibrating against the nightstand like an angry hornet. I was already awake, watching the gray light of dawn filter through the blinds of my bedroom in West Alder. The adrenaline from the court hearing had faded, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I picked up the phone. It was an email. The subject line read, "A family in crisis. Please pray for us." It had been sent to 50 people. The list included the pastor of the church in Briar Glen, the neighbors on my parents' street, my old high school teachers, and even a few of my distant cousins. I sat up and opened it. Dearest friends and family, it breaks a mother's heart to share this, but we need your support. Our daughter, Sadie, is going through a terrible mental health crisis. Following a dispute over her grandfather's estate, she has threatened to cut us off completely and take our beloved granddaughter, Holly, away from her stable grandparents. We are worried about Holly's safety in this unstable environment. We are asking for your prayers that Sadie finds the help she needs and returns to the family who loves her. We forgive her for her outbursts, and we just want her home. In faith, Marilyn. I stared at the screen. The words blurred. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. She had taken the truth, that I was protecting Holly and the trust, and twisted it into a narrative of instability. She was trying to isolate me. She wanted the community to look at me with pity and suspicion, to whisper that Sadie Long had finally cracked. A year ago, this would have destroyed me. I would have called everyone on that list, sobbing, trying to explain myself. I would have rushed to Briar Glen to beg her to retract it. I would have let the shame eat me alive. But I wasn't that Sadie anymore. I put the phone down. I did not reply. I did not call Marilyn. I stood up and walked into the kitchen. I made coffee. I listened to the sound of the beans grinding, the water boiling. I focused on the physical reality of my life. The countertop was clean. The rent was paid. Holly was sleeping safely in the next room. My reputation in Briar Glen did not matter. What mattered was the legal reality. What mattered was the truth. I heard Holly's door open. She padded into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Mommy?" she asked. "You are up early." "I am just getting a head start on the day," I said, turning to smile at her. "How about we make pancakes? The ones with the blueberries?" Holly's face lit up. "Can I mix the batter?" "You are the chief mixer," I said. We made breakfast. We laughed when flour got on her nose. We talked about her science project. I did not mention the email. I did not let Marilyn's poison enter our kitchen. At 9 o'clock, Mara called. "Did you see it?" she asked. Her voice was tight with anger. "I saw it." I said, "We can file for defamation." Mara said, "We can add it to the evidence file. It violates the spirit of the judge's ruling." "File it," I said calmly. "But do not respond. She wants a reaction. Mara. She wants me to scream. I am not going to give her the satisfaction." There was a pause on the line. Then Mara exhaled. "You have grown. Sadie," she said. "I had to." I said, "What is the update on the audit?" "The preliminary report is in." Mara said, "And Sadie, it is everything we thought and more." I sat down at the table, clutching my phone. "Tell me." The independent trustee review found the original trust documents from 20 years ago. Mara explained, but they also found a series of amendments that Marilyn and Gordon tried to file 5 years later. They tried to restructure the trust to give themselves full power of sale. "They tried to cut me out," I said. "They tried." Mara said, "But Lenora had blocked it. She had set up the trust with a protective clause. It is rare, but it is ironclad. It designated you as a contingent controller. Essentially, Lenora stipulated that if the primary trustees ever attempted to alter the terms of the trust or sell the principal asset without a unanimous beneficiary vote, their authority would be automatically suspended, and you would be elevated to sole decision-maker." I closed my eyes. "She knew," I whispered. "She knew they would try to break it. She didn't just know." Mara said, "She planned for it. She weaponized the paperwork." "Sadie, you are not stealing the cabin. You are fulfilling the exact specific instructions Lenora left to stop them from stealing it. The law is entirely on your side." "What about the money?" I asked. "The loan? That is the ugly part." Mara said, "Gordon's debt to North Creek Capital is real, and it is accumulating interest at a daily rate that would make a loan shark blush. If we do not liquidate the cabin..." Vane will foreclose on your parents' primary residence. They will lose the house in Briar Glen. Let them lose it, a dark voice in my head said. But then I thought about Gordon. I thought about the man who had taught me to ride a bike before he became a shadow in his own home. Can I see him? I asked. Who? Mara asked. My father. I said, I need to talk to him alone. I went to the hospital at noon. Gordon had been moved out of the ICU and into a private room overlooking the parking lot. I walked past the nurse's station, my head held high. I half expected Marilyn to be there, guarding the door like a dragon, but the room was quiet. Gordon was sitting up in bed, staring at the television. The volume was off. He looked smaller than I remembered. The arrogance that usually armored him was gone, stripped away by the hospital gown and the heart monitor beeping steadily beside him. He turned as I walked in. His eyes widened. Sadie? He croaked. I didn't sit down. I stood at the foot of the bed, gripping the plastic rail. Where is she? I asked. She's at the lawyer's, Gordon said, trying to fix things. There is nothing to fix. Dad, I said. The judge froze the assets. The audit is done. We know about the consulting fee. We know about the kickback. Gordon closed his eyes. He let out a long, shuddering breath. I didn't know about the kickback, he whispered. I swear. Sadie, I knew we had to sell. I knew Vane was pressuring us. But I didn't know she negotiated a fee for herself. But you knew about the plan. I said, you knew about Christmas. Gordon looked away, staring at his hands folded in his lap. Tell me, I said. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering. Tell me the truth. Just once. Gordon swallowed. He looked wet-eyed and pathetic. We rehearsed it, he said softly. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? I asked. The dinner? He said. 2 days before Christmas. We sat in the living room and went over the timeline. Marilyn said we had to make you leave before the courier arrived. She said if you were there when the papers were served, you would ask questions. You would see the injunction. So you staged a fight. I said, she wrote the script. Gordon said, she told me to be cold. She told me to ignore you. She said she would pick a fight about your job, or your parenting, and then escalate it until she could use the line, leave and never return. It was a line, I whispered. It wasn't even real anger. It was a line in a play. It was the only way to get you out fast enough, Gordon said. She said if we made you feel unwelcome, you would pack up Holly and drive away, and then we could tell the lawyers you were estranged and unavailable to sign. We could have bypassed you. I looked at him. This man was my father. He had sat there, eating roast beef, knowing that in 10 minutes his wife was going to eviscerate me, and he had agreed to it. He had rehearsed it. Why? I asked. Why did you let her do that to me? Why have you always let her do that to me? Gordon looked at me. A tear leaked out of the corner of his eye and tracked through the stubble on his cheek. Because it was easier, he said. Easier? It was easier to let her hate you than to let her hate me, Gordon said. When she has a target? Sadie, she is focused. She is happy. In a way, if she didn't have you to pick apart, she would have turned on me, and I am not strong enough to take it. He looked at me with a terrible, naked honesty. You were the shield. Sadie, you were always the shield. I stepped back from the bed. The revelation was nauseating, but it was also clarifying. I wasn't the black sheep because I was flawed. I was the black sheep because they needed one. They needed a place to put all their dysfunction. And I was the designated vessel. I am not your shield anymore, I said. Gordon nodded slowly. I know. You are the hammer now. I looked at him. I felt a strange lack of hatred. I just felt pity. He was a weak man who had sold his daughter for a quiet life. I am going to sell the cabin, I said. Gordon's head snapped up. You are? Yes, I said. But not to save you, and not to pay for Marilyn's lifestyle. I am doing it because Lenora gave me the power to decide. And I am deciding that I do not want to be tethered to you anymore. I turned to leave. Sadie, Gordon called out. I stopped at the door. She loved you, he said. Lenora. She really loved you. No, Dad, I said, looking back at him. She didn't just love me, she saw me, and she knew that one day I would be the only one standing. I walked out of the hospital. The air outside was cold and clean. I took a deep breath. I felt lighter. The mystery of my childhood was solved. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough, it was that I was too convenient. I met Mara at her office an hour later. I told her my decision. We sell. I said, but on my terms. Mara nodded, pulling a legal pad toward her. Dictate. First, I said, we do not sell to North Creek Capital directly. We put it on the open market for 48 hours to establish fair value. If Vane wants it, he pays market price. Agreed, Mara said. Second, I continued, the proceeds do not go to Marilyn. They go into a controlled trust account. The first payout goes to satisfy the lien. Gordon's debt. We pay it off directly to the lender. Not a penny touches their hands. Smart, Mara said. That saves the house in Briar Glen, but keeps them cash poor. Third, I said, the remaining balance is split. 50% goes to a permanent endowment for Winterline Outreach, named after Lenora Long. The other 50% goes into an educational trust for Holly and any future grandchildren of the family. And Marilyn and Gordon? Mara asked. What do they get? They get to keep their house, I said. They get to avoid bankruptcy, and they get to avoid jail for fraud. That is their inheritance. Mara smiled. That is justice. Sadie, draw it up, I said, and tell them the signing is tomorrow. The signing took place in the conference room at Klein and Barrage. It was neutral ground. Arthur Harrow arrived first, looking considerably less arrogant than he had in court. He was followed by a representative from North Creek Capital, a man in a sharp suit who looked at his watch every 30 seconds. Then Evan walked in. He looked tired. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too big for him. He nodded at me, a small, shy acknowledgement. Where is she? I asked. Evan sat down next to me. She refused to come. He said quietly, she said she wouldn't sit in a room and watch you steal her legacy. I laughed. A short, dry sound. Her legacy. Arthur cleared his throat. Mr. and Mrs. Long have granted Evan power of attorney to sign on their behalf for this transaction. We are ready to proceed. The documents were spread out on the table. It was a mountain of paper. The deed transfer, the trust disbursement, the payoff wire for the loan, the establishment of the new funds. I signed my name, Sadie Long, successor trustee. The pen scratched against the paper. It was the sound of chains breaking. I passed the papers to Evan. He took the pen. His hand hovered over the signature line. He looked at me. I am sorry. Sadie, he whispered, so only I could hear. For what? I asked. For everything, he said. For letting you take the heat. For being the golden child while you were drowning. I should have said something years ago. You are saying something now. I said, sign the paper. Evan, he signed. It was done. Pineglass Cabin was gone. The debt was paid. The money was safe. The lawyer shook hands. The representative from North Creek Capital took the deed and left. Arthur packed up his briefcase and scurried out. Eager to escape the tension, Evan and I stood on the sidewalk outside the bakery. The winter sun was setting, casting long shadows down the street. What will you do? I asked him. I do not know, Evan said. He lit a cigarette, his hands cupping the flame against the wind. I think I might move. Maybe go west. Get a job that doesn't involve Dad's firm. You should, I said. You can't heal in the place where you got sick. He looked at me. You are keeping Holly away from her, aren't you? Yes, I said. Good, Evan said. She destroys things. Sadie, she doesn't mean to. Maybe, but she does. Keep Holly safe. He hugged me. It was awkward and stiff, the hug of two people who had forgotten how to be siblings, but it was real. Goodbye. Sadie, he said. Goodbye. Evan, I had one last thing to do. I drove to the house in Briar Glen. The Christmas lights were still up, looking garish and sad in the January twilight. I didn't have a key anymore. I had left my set on the counter the night of the dinner. I rang the bell. It took a long time for the door to open. Marilyn stood there. She was wearing a bathrobe, her hair unbrushed. She looked 20 years older than she had a week ago. She didn't invite me in. She stood in the doorway, blocking the view of the foyer where Gordon had collapsed. "You sold it," she said. Her voice was flat. "It is done." I said, "The debt is paid. You get to keep the house." She laughed. A bitter, jagged sound. "Keep the house. With what money?" "Sadie, you locked up the proceeds. We have nothing to live on. You have your husband's pension." I said, "You have Social Security. You have enough. You just do not have enough to pretend anymore." She glared at me. Her eyes were full of a toxic mixture of rage and grief. "You are a cruel girl," she said. "I always knew there was something cold in you. I am not cold." "Mother," I said, "I am clear." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a written boundary agreement Mara had drafted. "Here are the rules," I said. Marilyn didn't take the paper. She just stared at it. "I will read them to you." I said, "You do not contact me. You do not contact Holly's school. You do not post about us on social media. If you want to see Holly, you submit a request to me via email. If I agree, and that is a big if, the visit will be supervised, in a public place. For 1 hour." She scoffed. "I am not a criminal. You are a woman who tried to gaslight an entire community to isolate your daughter." I said, "You are dangerous, Marilyn, and I am not letting you near my child without a safety rail." "And if I refuse?" she challenged. "Then you never see us again." I said, "And I release the full audit report to the church council." Marilyn flinched. The church was her last stage, the last place where she was still the saintly Mrs. Long. She snatched the paper from my hand. "Get off my porch," she whispered. I turned to go. I walked down the brick path, past the manicured hedges, past the statue of the cherub in the garden. "Sadie!" she screamed. I stopped and turned back. "You will regret this," she yelled. "You will be alone." I looked at her. She was standing in the doorway of a big, empty house, clutching a robe, screaming at the dark. I smiled. "I am not alone," I said. "I have Holly, and I have the truth." I got into my car and drove away. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. That house was just a building now. It wasn't my anchor. That night, I sat on the floor of my living room with Mara. We were drinking cheap wine and eating takeout pizza. Holly was asleep in her room. "We did it," Mara said. "We actually beat them." I nodded. I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't the triumphant feeling of a movie ending. It was quieter. It was the feeling of putting down a heavy backpack after a long hike. "There is one more thing," Mara said. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a file. "The auditors found this in a safety deposit box that was linked to the trust," she said. "It wasn't in the main files. It was separate." "What is it?" I asked. "It is a letter," Mara said, "from Lenora, but it is not addressed to you. It is addressed to the successor." I took the envelope. It was yellowed with age. The date on the postmark was from 30 years ago. I opened it. "To the one who comes after. If you are reading this. It means the cabin is gone. I knew Marilyn would force a sale eventually. She is a creature of appetite, but there is something you need to know about the developer. The man named Vane. He is not a stranger. I found letters in Gordon's desk from the 90s. Letters from Vane. They were not business letters. They were blackmail. Vane knows about the accident. The one at the lake in 1995. The one Gordon said was a deer strike. It wasn't a deer. And Vane has the photos. I could not prove it before I died. But if Vane is back, it means he is still bleeding Gordon. Dig deeper. The roots of this tree are rotten, but the soil holds the truth. Good luck. Lenora. I lowered the letter. The room seemed to tilt. The accident at the lake. 1995. I would have been 3 years old. Mara looked at me. "What does it say?" I handed her the letter. I thought it was over. I whispered. Mara read it. Her face went pale. "This isn't over," she said softly. "This was just the first round." I looked at the window. The reflection of the room stared back at me. Me, Mara, the empty pizza box. Vane wasn't just a lender. He was a ghost from a past I didn't even know existed. And he had my father in a vice grip that went far beyond money. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the streetlights of West Alder. I thought about the Revenge Stories channel I listened to. I thought about how the stories always ended with a neat bow. The villain was punished. The hero walked away. But real life wasn't like that. Real life was a web. You cut one string, and you realized it was connected to 5 others. I wasn't afraid. Though, I felt a cold, sharp resolve settling in my chest. I touched the glass. "Okay, Lenora," I thought, "you gave me the shovel." I turned back to Mara. "We need to hire a private investigator," I said. Mara smiled, a dangerous glint in her eye. "I know a guy," she said. I picked up my wine glass. "To the truth?" I said. "To the truth," Mara answered. We clinked glasses. The sound rang out like a bell. The story of the cabin was over, but the story of the Long family? That was just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to Leave and Never Return. My parents said to my 8-year-old me. During Christmas dinner, 5 minutes later. This has been a journey through betrayal, legal battles, and the reclaiming of a life. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed Sadie's battle for justice, please hit that subscribe button for the Revenge Stories channel so you never miss a new episode. What did you think of Lenora's final letter? What do you think really happened at the lake in 1995? Share your theories in the comments in English. I read every single one. Until next time, stay safe and stand your ground.